What is up, you guys? This is JP here. First things first, thank you to everybody who's coming over from the Vegans Gains channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all you guys who subscribed. If you guys didn't really pay attention or you guys didn't get what my channel's about, it's obviously a fitness channel centered around three main things, and that's helping you gain muscle, get stronger, or manage your weight. If you guys want one-on-one training, online training, nutrition training, or small group training, please head on over to my website. That's jpfitnesspro.com. If you guys would like to talk to me about my services before you purchase them, again, the easiest way to contact me is through my website. You could message me on any of my social medias, but those are a little bit hard to get back to anybody because I have a lot of social medias that I post on. So again, the easiest way to get any of my services, contact me, is through my website, jpfitnesspro.com. Speaking of my social medias as well, they're all linked in the info section of all my videos, so please follow me on any of those that you have. I have a Tumblr, Twitter, a Facebook, obviously a YouTube, Instagram, all that good stuff. All right, today's video is going to be about the touch and go deadlift versus the dead stop deadlift and the pros and cons of each. Now, first let me show you what those are, just if you're not familiar with them. The dead stop deadlift is essentially doing the deadlift from a dead stop on every single repetition. So when you do, even if you have 9 to 12 reps for one set, what you do is you do one rep, you lower the bar, you wait a few seconds, reset your form, and then you go on to the next repetition, and you do every single rep like that. Let me show you how that looks like. So what you do is you set up with the bar, get your form, lift, controlled, stop, you'd reset, and then you do another rep just like that. Now the touch and go deadlift is where you don't reset your form between every single repetition. You do one rep, you lower the bar, and you, I don't want to say bounce, but you're essentially bouncing the ground or bouncing the weight off the ground a little bit. Even if it's a little bit, you're going to get some bounce from it. You're just touching the ground with the weight, and then you're immediately coming back up. So you're not resetting on every single rep. So a touch and go deadlift would look like this. Get your form, control, control, control. Now, that's a touch and go deadlift. Now, you probably see the touch and go deadlift most common. I see it most common in people's various deadlift styles. Whenever I'm in a gym, I almost always see touch and go deadlifts done over dead stop deadlifts. When I commonly see dead stop deadlifts, it's done with powerlifters. Like, there's a few powerlifters that I follow on Facebook. They basically reset between every single rep because, again, specificity is higher. Now, I have a study that I'm going to go over some notes in a little bit. I have it on my phone, but first I'm going to talk about my opinions on between the two and the pros and cons of each and what I think before I even went over any studies. And a lot of it's just kind of based on logic. Now, obviously, if you can tell that the dead stop deadlift, at least from what I've first seen it, is going to be harder. Anyone who's done pause reps or waited between reps and reset understands how it feels and how it's harder. Even with the deadlift, you guys can try it yourself. Do one rep, reset like how I did, or you could even go to the extreme, do one rep, do singles. Do one rep, lower the weight, take a step back, wait 10 seconds, and do the next rep. You're going to realize that when you do reps like that, each rep is going to be more difficult than when you did the touch and go. Now, there's a reason for that, and I'm going to explain that in a little bit. And that applies to any type of lift, bench press, overhead press, squat, anything. Again, touch and go, there's two key components, at least with the deadlift. One of those applies to everything, and one of them is just specific to the deadlift. So the two reasons why it's harder is that, one, you're actually bouncing the weight off the ground when you do a touch and go deadlift. I meant why it's easier, but you're actually bouncing the weight off the ground when you're doing the touch and go deadlift, regardless of how hard you bounce the weight. You can do a controlled bounce like I just did, just regular touch and go, or you can do it excessively and do it hard and make the lift a lot more sloppy and do it that way, but you're still gonna get some assistance when you do the bounce off the ground. It's one of Newton's laws is that every action is going to have an opposite and equal reaction. So when you bounce the weight off the ground, it's going to come back up. Now, that's one reason why touch and go deadlift is going to be easier. And that first reason is especially prominent when you're using bumper plates. It's still going to happen with metal plates, but not nearly as much, but especially if you're using bumper plates. You may see somebody who always picks bumper plates and then they do touch and go deadlifts and they're just constantly hitting the ground and they're getting a big bounce off of it. Now, the second reason why touch and go deadlifts are easier is because of the stretch reflex we have from the stretch shortening cycle. People underestimate the effect that our ligaments and tendons have on lifts. When you immediately go from an eccentric portion of a lift straight into the concentric portion with no pause in between, you're maximizing your benefit of the stretch shortening cycle. Again, ligaments and tendons have an elastic component to them. So when you think about a squat, when you're lowering the weight into a squat, if right when you get into your lowest position, if you come straight out the hole and then rack the weight, and then you did another repetition where you paused, took like a 3-4 second pause at the bottom, and then try to come out the hole, the second way is definitively going to be harder. It's just going to feel harder. It's going to be harder. Mechanically, it's going to be harder. You're not taking advantage of that elastic component of your ligaments and tendons. So that's the second reason why a touch and go deadlift is easier. And that second reason applies to any type of lift. When you're lowering the weight on the bench press, if you go straight from an eccentric to a concentric with no pause in between, it's going to be harder than if you did a pause bench press. And essentially, a dead stop deadlift is like a pause deadlift. You're pausing, resetting on the ground, and then you're doing your next repetition, where a touch and go is you're immediately going from the eccentric to the concentric portion of the lift. Now, so in essence, when you look at those two reasons, a dead stop deadlift is just going to be harder. And you also think, okay, well, it's harder. What if someone says, well, I don't care? Well, one, if you're doing less mechanical work for a touch and go deadlift, you're getting less return on investment for every single rep that you do when you do touch and go. And the second reason why you should care is because a dead stop deadlift is very unspecific to strength. If you're anyone who values strength in any sort of way, you test your 1 rep max, your 3 rep max, when you do lifts, specifically your 1 rep max, you have to understand as a 1 rep max always starts from a dead stop. So if most of your reps are done from that bounce and involving the stretch shortening cycle heavily and with touch and go deadlifts, think about it. If you're a touch and go deadlifter, the only rep that really is very specific to a 1 rep max attempt is your very first repetition, and that's it. Every other rep after your first rep is going to be not really as specific when compared to a 1 rep max attempt. Now, that's just my opinion on it. And if you haven't kind of got the gist of it, in almost every single case, I would recommend someone do dead stop deadlifts. Helps your form be correct, more specific to 1 rep max. It's harder for the right reasons, and it makes it, again, it's not easy to cheat when you do dead stop deadlifts. When you're doing touch and go deadlifts, you can cheat every which way. Bounce it crazy, your form goes out the fucking window, all the shit. So the notes I have are from a study, but I read a research review, monthly applications in strength sport from Greg Knuckles, Mike Zordos, and Eric Helms. I don't have time to dig through studies all the time. I really like it. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. You guys should check them out, but I'm just gonna kind of go over the objective facts from that study. So what happens is they had 2 different measurements. They measured the differences from between conditions to peak bounce height. So basically, they had one group do both styles, a touch and go and a dead stop. And then from the bounce height from the touch and go, however high the bar essentially got benefits from that, they measured the differences. And the dead stop condition took 93.4% longer to break the bar from the floor, which is no surprise. When you're doing a dead stop, moving something from a dead stop, it's harder than when something already has momentum to keep it going. So basically the dead stop deadlift was harder in that sort of sense. Joint moments were at least 70% greater in the dead stop deadlift, and total work was at least 64% greater in dead stop deadlifts versus touch and go deadlifts. So again, work is force times displacement. So you're moving the bar the same distance, so the only thing that's left is that more force was required to get the bar off the ground, which again makes sense. You're getting assistance from the stretch shortening cycle and the bar bouncing off the ground when you're doing a touch and go. Then the differences between the entire concentric portion of the lift, the dead stop condition performed 18.8% more total work across all joints. And then vertical ground reaction forces were 27.6% higher in the dead stop deadlift condition. So one other thing to note in this is that I think they used the Borg RPE scale, which is rating of perceived exertion. They didn't do reps, RPE based off reps in reserve. But regardless, RPE was higher when the group did the dead stop deadlifts. So mechanistically, the dead stop deadlifts were harder. Subjectively, the dead stop deadlifts were harder. And this was a crossover design, if I'm not mistaken. So it was the same group, just two different conditions. So there you guys have it. In every single way, the dead stop deadlift was definitively harder. I think in almost every single scenario, you should do the dead stop deadlifts. The only few scenarios I recommend you use touch and go deadlifts are, one, if you honestly have, well, I couldn't even say that because I would still recommend dead stop deadlifts. The only real scenario I guess I would say that you should use touch and go deadlifts is if, one, you refuse to do dead stop for some odd reason. Let's just say you respect golden age bodybuilders and they did touch and go, so you want to do touch and go. Fine. If you refuse to budge, you refuse to budge. The second thing is if you're short on time. If you're honestly pressed for minutes on your time and you need to get your workout done, then I guess in that sense, dead stop deadlifts are going to take more time because you have to reset on every single rep. But again, I mean, a lot of people may exaggerate on how much time they don't have. I mean, it's only a couple more minutes for you to do the dead stop deadlifts. But if you're like, I don't even have a minute, I'm already running late on certain things, then I guess that would be another benefit of touch and go. Now, regardless, if you do touch and go, I recommend you do a controlled eccentric and just do a light touch. Don't slam the weight or bounce the weight off the ground. If you really want to make sure you're not using too much of that bounce or getting too janky with your deadlifts, don't use bumper plates when you do touch and go. Use metal plates because that'll really, one, if you're using metal plates and you're slamming it on the ground, you could damage the floor. And two, if you're using metal plates, you're not going to get as much benefit from that shortening cycle. If you guys have any questions, comments, please post them down below. Sorry if this video was a little long. It was a complex topic. Thank you again to anyone who came from Vegan Gains channel. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next video.